In this video, I'm going to teach you what feedback is, how to improve on it, and how to design for it in your game so that your game becomes way more responsive and as a result, much more fun to play. So let's take a quick look at this clip that I made. This is the game that I've been working on in the background. More on that later. But you can quickly see that there's a lot of effects taking place on the screen right now. There's only one major takeaway I really want you to focus on right now. And it's that for every action, there is a reaction. That's right, guys, we solved it. Sir Isaac Newton is a game developer. I'm kidding. But he did invent the laws of motion, and particularly the third law of motion specifically says for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. I don't necessarily agree with the word equal here in the context of game dev, and I'll explain a little bit more later. But he's basically painting the picture of what the premise is of game feel or feedback. It's basically when you have responsiveness in your game so that your player knows what they're interacting with is actually an interactable. This could be a direct series of events that they take, or this could be like background stuff and environmental things that say, hey, the game world is breathing back at you. All right. So let's do a quick thought experiment. Now, I'm not going to worry about what the button actually does. I'm actually more concerned about what the button feels like, what the button sounds like, what the button does, right? And in context of what happens when you interact with it. So I'm going to ask you, hey, click the button. What happens? Do we hear clicking? Is there a spring in the background? And that basically means like as soon as we press it and let go, the button kind of like oscillates. Is it a heavy button where you need two hands and you're grunting and you're trying to push all the way down? You see, what we're discussing is the feedback effects of what occurs when you press the button. That's the most important part here because that's what determines what type of effects we're going to make for our game. So similar to pressing a button, we can see in this clip that our player character is damaging the enemy. How do we even know that? Well, you can see that there's a bunch of effects that we can see, so we're clearly seeing with our eyes, hey, something's happening, right? And also, the reason why we need feedback, and this is a very important part for game designers, is that this is what directly creates engagement. The more responsive a feedback is, the better it is to feel it. It's like, oh yeah, this looks pretty cool. Oh, I feel powerful. Oh, I feel the impact of my actions. And this is what creates engagement, all right? So how do we know that we're actually like dealing damage and doing what we have to do? And that's because there's a list of techniques that we are using to emulate and showcase exactly how, we're damaging this opponent, right? Being said, what are the techniques that I need to account for? All right. I broke down kind of like a category of what things you should consider when you're writing the actual effect that you're writing. So let's go ahead and break it down with the first one, reaction. Okay. Reaction is very simple. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's just stating it's just delivering the impact of your action. Okay. This is what you're going to be thinking about when you take action, right? So like think about your sound effects, how the character shakes, the hit animations, the particles, you're showcasing the impact at the end of the day. And so everything that you do related to this must indicate the fact that you just did something directly towards an object or a component. All right. Non-action is when it's more environmental based or it doesn't need the player's active button pressing at this case, right? So think about walking on grass or watching waters, right? If you're walking on grass, yeah, you can hear it rustling. But if you don't walk, maybe you see like a little wind stripe and you hear like a little whistle and it's the wind pushing against the grass and you can see and hear, oh, wait a minute, I'm in this game world, I see grass. Oh, if I look at the waters, I can see like the ocean crashing, the waves on each other. So I can hear those sound effects. I can see, like how it moves, right? And so these are going to be visual indicators that just showcase what's happening in the background with or without your input. And by the way, non-action doesn't always have to mean it's directly environmental. You know how when you open a pause menu, for example, and you have like the little, let's say like arrow or a little hand cursor that kind of just points back and forth saying like, hey, are you clicking this? This little indicator is just saying, hey, like I'm actively responding to the fact that you're not taking action, but I'm giving you feedback that I'm currently pointing at this option. And if you press another button, we're probably going to go in here. So basically non-action are feedback loops or feedback techniques that aren't directly associated with the player clicking on something at that moment. Sequence is going to be the property that focuses on the timing of the reaction itself. And so what this basically means is you probably want to, and this is typically used to really exaggerate your reaction. So for example, if you take a large piece of damage, let's say, right, like you got stabbed by a javelin, right, your game probably like does a freeze frame for a second to say, oh, you like really took a lot of damage, right? Maybe you're about to dodge something, like there's a bullet coming in and like as soon as you're like moving away from it, the game kind of like goes in slow motion. It's like, oh, you're dodging, you're dodging, you're dodging. And so that slow motion effect kind of exaggerates the fact that, hey, you are responding to what's going on here. All right. So think about, again, how long a reaction should be placed when getting that responsiveness, right? And then finally, subtle is basically going to be just like the mood setters, the tonality, the lighting, the color, the music, the volume of the effect, any type of art style you're trying to exaggerate. Basically, think about the properties of the feedback and how you would amplify it so that it fits your game's style or, like tone that you're trying to go for. All right. Those are the main four categories that you should pay attention to when designing your feedback loop, right? So now the question is, how do I know when to use each effect appropriately, right? And this is a very simple equation. It's a basic action reaction, right? Being said, when you type, when you look at the action, it's what am I actually going to do? Then you want to observe the context, right? Why am I designing this action in the first place? Am I trying to impact someone? Am I trying to showcase personality? Am I trying to do something, kind of funny? And then the reaction is going to be how you actually showcase it in game, whether it's visuals, audio, camera cues. That's what you have to pay attention to. All right. So, best example is, hey, let's say you're taking damage, right? Then, yeah, what is the purpose of taking damage? You're showcasing impact. You're showcasing the fact that you're taking damage. Like I said this 100 times, right? So, how do I showcase that? Well, your character's color could probably change to red for a second. Maybe they flicker. Maybe they flinch. Maybe their face kind of like reacts, right? Maybe there's particle effects that showcase that. The sound effect is what happens when, like the bullet touches the player. It's probably like a burst sound effect, right? The camera starts shaking. Your character starts they're like highlighted for a moment because it showcased, hey, you got hit. Those are the things that we have to pay attention to. But again, everything that I just said doesn't necessarily have to happen on a main menu, for example, right? In a menu, yeah, you have like a button, you have like the cursor, you have a highlight, and when you click on it, maybe you have like a little special animation or effect, but you're not necessarily going to have like a camera shake every single time, right? You see, the reason why we need to have this formula is because we really need to pay very close attention to the context of why we use the actions that we do. That's the most important part here. So, being said, how many feedback effects do I actually need? And this is a very important part. Remember when Isaac Newton himself said, "Hey guys, I'm a game developer." I'm kidding, but the point is, he said, like action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Again, we're not going to attest to the word equal here because we really want to watch out for the scale. Okay, maybe it does make sense at the end of the day. But the idea is, the more, as game developers, we actually just want to kind of like pump as many feedback techniques as possible, right? So the idea that you want to kind of pay attention to is continuously add magnitude to the actual effect that's being taken place. In other words, have more quantities and properties and higher volume of feedback, and when you're trying to exaggerate the effect. Now, I would also argue that your effect doesn't have to be hyper exaggerated, but having a lot of effects is still a very positive thing in general because that's something that creates more engagement anyway. So, best example for this, right? Let's take a look at this clip. On the left, you'll see that our player character is damaging our opponent, and there's like a bunch of particles. There's a burst effect. You see like the zoom, like a lot of things are going on. But why is that the case? Because we can clearly see that we're doing a bunch of damage to the enemy. They're dropping from 125 HP to 45 HP, which is like a massive amount of damage, right? On the right side, however, you can quickly see that, yeah, we're damaging enemies. And by principle, we still have the same effects. We have the particles, we have the shaking, we have the red flashing, we have the little zoom in. It's not very visible, but the point is, like, it's still the same thing, but it's the magnitude that changes the difference. You see, left is powerful because we're doing massive damage, but on the right, we're doing 5 damage per bullet, so that's barely doing anything. They're barely shaking, they're barely doing anything, but we're still showcasing to the player, hey, you're damaging, you're doing damage, you're making progress, you're currently interacting with our game objects. That's the important part, all right? Now, one last final experiment that I want to showcase is what happens if we don't have feedback at all, right? So this is the prototype of the game, and it completely lacks feedback. Yet, we can still see that our functions are working, right? I'm doing damage. You can see the enemy's HP dropping. You can see little particle effects, right? So, like, on paper, yeah, I'm doing what I have to do. Why does it look so lifeless? And that's because we don't have that many effects going on. We probably have 2 to 3 in this example. And that's bad, right? Like I said, we have the HP dropping, we have the colors flashing, and then maybe the hit animation. But that's not suffice to create engagement. Now, if we look at the normal feedback loop, here we basically correct all of our issues by, again, making the character shake, making them have a hit animation, flashing, opacity, the little numbers that roll and say, oh, you took -5 damage, particle effects, little confettis everywhere. These are the things that, again, as you continue to add and add and add, you'll quickly see, oh, it becomes more engaging to watch. And I would say that, hey, this is like normal feedback. This is pretty good. Nothing wrong, right? But as developers, and the reason why I'm saying, hey, like equal opposite reaction, right? Try to add as many as possible depending on the game that you're writing, right? So, for example, on this exaggerated feedback, we still have the exact same thing, just more particle effects, more camera shaking, more like comic effects showing up, the exaggerated zoom little like things on the side of the screen that say like, hey, we did burst damage, comic words, right? Like stagger, poison, countered, bumped, burst. Like there's a lot going on. And all we did is just added a little bit more of, again, techniques, but then we also amplified the properties of like each little effect that occurs. And so this is what exaggerated feedback looks like, and it makes the game way more engaging as a result. So I really hope that this video helps. I know we talked a lot about like the properties, what feedback is, how to make it good, how to design for it, but in the link down below within the description, you can find a list of situations of like, hey, like what are the actual techniques I should put in my game? What should I consider when I'm doing action, when I'm doing a pause menu, when I'm looking at characters, when I'm idling? And so I kind of made like a little resource for that. So if that's something you're interested in, please go ahead and check the link in the description down below. Thank you for watching, and go back making your game.